The night was frozen and silent. Across the endless stretch of Wisconsin farmland, a scream tore through the air, sharp and desperate, before dissolving into nothing. Then, only the wind remained, howling, dragging across the fields, carrying a silence so heavy it seemed alive. Plainfield was a small town, the kind where everyone knew each other's names and habits. It was ordinary, safe. Among the familiar faces lived a man named Ed. Polite, soft-spoken, always a little hunched as though afraid to take up too much space. He would nod at neighbors, offer a thin smile, but never linger in conversation. People called him odd, but harmless. And yet, whispers existed. Strange movements at night when someone spotted him walking toward the cemetery with a lantern. An unbearable stench that sometimes drifted from his farmhouse, rotting and sour. Still, the townsfolk laughed it off. "Ed's just lonely," they said. "Poor man, never hurt anyone." That illusion shattered when the local hardware store owner vanished. Her register was left open, her purse untouched, the lights burning. She had simply disappeared. Witnesses claimed she was last seen with Ed Gein. When police knocked at his farmhouse, the snow crunched under their boots, the windows tightly shuttered. A neighbor muttered nervously, "Ed's harmless, right?" A deputy's voice cut through, low and uneasy. "Then why won't he ever let anyone inside that house?" The officers pushed the door. Rusted hinges screamed as it opened. A rush of icy, foul air poured out, thick enough to make their eyes water. None of them could have guessed what horrors waited in the dark. The beam of a flashlight swept across the kitchen, cutting through layers of shadow. The first officer gagged, clamping a hand over his mouth. The air was thick with the rancid stench of rot, clinging to the walls, heavy enough to choke. The room looked less like a home and more like a ruin. Broken chairs, piles of filthy newspapers, animal bones scattered across the floor. But then the light caught on something resting neatly on a shelf. A skull, hollowed out, polished, its crown carved smooth, transformed into a bowl. "Jesus Christ," one officer whispered, his voice cracking. Another hissed back, "Keep moving." Step by step, the nightmare unfolded. A chair built from bones, the armrests wrapped in flesh. A lamp whose shade was stitched from human skin. Every object they touched felt like it had been pulled from a nightmare and nailed into reality. Then came the kitchen corner. The flashlight wavered, then froze. Hanging from the rafters was a body, suspended upside down like butchered livestock. It was the missing woman, her torso slit open, her skin peeled in jagged strips. The sight knocked the air from their lungs. Images flashed in their minds. Gein trudging through graveyards, dragging corpses through the night, carving, stitching, shaping them into grotesque relics. His house was not a home, it was a shrine to his obsession. One deputy trembled as he whispered, "This isn't human." Another replied in a broken voice, "No, it's something worse." They reached a bedroom door. The flashlight caught on a face. No, not a face, just the skin of one, stretched and shaped into a mask. Then another and another. A collection of stolen visages staring back at them from the dark. The youngest officer backed away, his breath shallow. "He wore them," he muttered. And still, the locked door at the end of the hallway loomed, silent, waiting, hiding what none of them had yet seen. In the stark light of the interrogation room, Ed Gein sat quietly, his hands folded neatly in his lap. His expression was calm, almost childlike, as if he were waiting for a polite conversation to begin. The officers stared at him in disbelief. How could this soft-spoken man be the same monster whose home had been a graveyard of horrors? "Why, Ed?" one officer asked, his voice barely steady. "Why would you do this?" Ed lifted his eyes slowly, his tone disturbingly innocent. "I just wanted to be with my mother again," he said. "She never really left me. I only tried to bring her back." The words spilled out of him without hesitation. He described how he prowled cemeteries at night, digging up the dead, how he crafted suits of skin to wear, believing he could become her, how the furniture, the masks, the grotesque trophies were all part of his attempt to hold on to her presence. Every confession came with a strange detachment, as if he were explaining chores, not crimes. In the courtroom, when the evidence was revealed, gasps echoed. Faces turned away. One neighbor whispered, voice thick with dread, "We thought monsters only lived in the movies, but he lived right next door." Psychiatrists called him insane, but to the townspeople, it was something far darker, proof that evil could wear the most ordinary face. Not long after, his farmhouse was burned to the ground. Flames consumed the wooden walls, sparks clawing into the night sky. Some said it was revenge, others said it was mercy, an attempt to erase the nightmare. But the smoke rose like a warning, as though the darkness inside could never be contained. Years later, even his grave was desecrated, his headstone stolen, fragments carried away. It was as if his legacy refused to stay buried, clawing its way back to the surface. The story closes on a chilling truth. Evil, once unearthed, never rests. It lingers, waiting, watching, just beyond the edge of the ordinary.